Now turn to Section 1.
You will hear two science lecturers discussing space exploration.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully to the first part of the conversation and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, John. How was your conference on space travel?
Hi, Susan. It was great. We heard some fascinating speakers, especially one fellow who was an expert on Mars. He thinks it's quite feasible for humans to live there in the near future.
Well, if we spent the billions of dollars that go into space research on looking after our own planet, then perhaps we wouldn't need to worry about the Earth being uninhabitable in 100 years' time. Nor would we need to look for another planet to colonise.
Yes, but there are some important things that space exploration can teach us, especially about the history of our own planet and its atmosphere. That sort of knowledge could help us solve some of the problems that threaten our planet.
Still, I don't really see why they have to send astronauts into space. Robotics is so much more advanced now. Why can't they simply send robots?
Well, robotics has come a long way, and it is more expensive to send a manned spaceship into orbit. But the biggest problem with robots is that they have to be programmed for every possible eventuality.
Yes, I suppose you're right. Robots just can't react to situations independently the way that humans do. They still need us to tell them what to do.
That's right. Robots may have come a long way, but if you're going to go to all the expense of building one, you really need to make sure it's going to work when it gets there, and they don't tend to take risks with new and untested technology. What if it lets you down? So instead, a lot of the space technology nowadays is actually based on the technology they used in the 1970s, because we know that it works and it's reliable.
So, do you think it will ever be possible to send robots to Mars?
I'm not sure. One of the speakers spoke about that, and he says that communication would be a problem.
Is that because of the conditions? I mean, those extremes of temperature and even the atmosphere itself would probably create an awful lot of interference.
Yes, but they're both issues that can be dealt with. No, the real problem is simply how far away it is. That would cause long delays before the robots received any messages about what to do next. So, for the moment, they don't think it's feasible.
Now listen to the next part of the conversation and answer questions 7 to 10.
But tell me, do you really think we should be contemplating sending humans to Mars at all? Don't you think we should wait until we do have the technology?
Well, many years ago, the civilizations that built the pyramids or that began building enormous cathedrals must have started the project never expecting to see it finished. I think we should take the same approach and start our preparations now.
That's an interesting point, though I'm still not convinced. Surely you don't foresee a time when humans will be living on Mars? That's just science fiction, isn't it?
Not at all. I think there is a distinct possibility that humans will live there.
But what about the conditions there? Even the dirt on the ground could kill us.
Yes, I agree with you there, but we can easily build a self-contained structure there so people don't need to go outside.
I suppose the ground does also contain a lot of resources, so getting metals wouldn't be a problem.
That's right. A lot of building materials could be found there, but there are still many risks involved.
Yes, what about radiation? I don't think there will ever be a way to shield us totally from cosmic radiation, even inside a spaceship.
I can't agree with you there. Astronauts have been travelling in space for a long time now, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem for us.
I just don't think we have enough experience of living in space long term.
But you have to accept that it is within the realms of possibility that one day there will be a Martian space station.
Well, I have every faith in science, and Mars does seem to be the next frontier. So, yes, I imagine we will eventually send a space mission there. but I can't see people living there.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear an admissions officer from a UK university talking to a group of postgraduate students in a university abroad about applying for a place at his university. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
As I said earlier, there is, I think, at Rexford an excellent combination of physical and geographical advantages, as well as having a rural setting and still being close to central London. Something that will certainly be of interest to you is that Rexford is just 35 minutes from London Airport. At Rexford, we have a strong research capability. We came 7th out of 101 universities in last year's research assessment, carried out by a government body, and did particularly well in your particular subjects, engineering and science. Actually, we got a top research grade of 5 for engineering, geography and computer sciences. One further point, and I know from talking to you individually that a number of you may be looking for some experience in industry after the course, is that all our science and engineering research departments have unusually close relationships with industry in the area. Anyway, that's enough sales talk from me. I'll just take a sip of this coffee that's just arrived, thank you, and then I'll say something about what actually happens when you apply. Right. Now, if you do decide to make an application, what you do is send it directly to me in my department. I will then immediately send confirmation and the application process begins. And I'd like to say at this point that you shouldn't worry if this process doesn't work all that quickly. I mean, occasionally there are postal problems, but most often the hold-up is caused by references. The people you give as referees, shall we say, take their time to reply. Anyway, it's absolutely normal for this process to take 3 to 4 months. What I do in this period is keep in touch with you and reassure you that things are moving along. One of the ways we've devised to help you decide about applying, as well as later when you've been accepted, hopefully, is to put you in contact with, if possible, a student from your own country who is at present studying with us. What you can do is phone them up, we will of course liaise between you, and discuss your concerns with them. That way you can get an objective opinion of what you can expect if you come to live and study at Rexford. Not only the academic atmosphere, but important details like what the leisure facilities are like, and whether the English weather and food are really as awful as everybody says.
No.
If you decide you can face it, the contact can also help you just before you leave with tips on what to pack and that sort of thing. At the moment, I think we've got 2 second-year students and 1 postgraduate from this country.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, to move on to the other concerns you expressed earlier. At a UK university, as I'm sure you know, you will be in an environment where independent learning is the norm, which takes most students a while to adjust to, and at a time when you will be separated from your normal surroundings, and in most cases, your family. This can be a difficult time. But remember that something like 25% of our student body are international students like yourselves, and that there are several organisations in the university and city whose main purpose is to offer help and ensure that your time with us is enjoyable and useful. One or two of you touched on the subject of accommodation earlier, so I'll just add a few points. It is the university's policy to give priority in the allocation of residence places to 3 categories, and those are visiting students, exchange students, and new postgraduate students. However, demand exceeds supply, so there is still a need to put your name down early for campus accommodation, particularly if your family is accompanying you. This means that the earlier you decide whether you want to study with us, and so get the procedure moving, the better it will be for everybody. Yes?
What if you would prefer to live outside the university?
If you're planning to live off campus, you've got to sort things out even earlier. As with everything in short supply, the good accommodation gets snapped up months before the beginning of term. In other words, if you're starting in October, you need to be thinking about it in June, or at the very latest July. So you do need to think very carefully about what you need, how much you can afford to pay well in advance. What you can't do is leave it until a few days before the start of term. The agencies in town are pretty good. It's just a matter of contacting them in good time. Of course, we have a full-time accommodation officer available to help all students. She'll get in touch with you when you're accepted. She's got plenty of contacts in the town and will deal with the agencies on your behalf. One or two of you asked me earlier about your level of spoken English. Obviously, most of you have already achieved a lot. I wish I could speak your language half as well. Having said that, though, I'm afraid the lecturers will make little or no allowance for the presence of non-native speakers in the audience. So anything you can do to improve your spoken English, even beyond the pretty high levels most of you have already reached, will help make your stay with us that bit more fun for you. Some extra practice before you arrive is worth more than, for example, private lessons afterwards when you won't really have time. Oh, and one last thing before I invite further questions. It's very important that you always...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3. Track 22. Section 3. You will hear a tutor and a student discussing a seminar. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Come in.
Hi.
Oh, hello, Ahmed. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Have a seat. So, how do you think the seminar went last week?
Oh, well, I enjoyed it, yes, though I'm not sure I really followed parts of the discussion that took place. You know, about the theory and all that.
Well, we can talk about that later. But were you comfortable in a group?
Oh, it's better, I think, than working on your own, though you're comparing yourself all the time with the other students there.
Okay. Well, let's talk about how you did and look at some strategies to help you in the future.
That would be great.
Now, one of the things that students often overlook when they go to seminars is that you do need to prepare for them. You can't rely on other people.
I know, and I did look at the results of the experiments we did in class and write them up beforehand, as you said.
Yes, and that was good. It made it easier to analyze them. But you have to do some background reading as well. Did you get the list of articles I sent round?
I've started to read them.
Okay, well, you'll know that for next time.
Yes, sure.
So, let's move on to your participation in the seminar.
Right.
Perhaps you can tell me how you think that went.
Yeah, well, I'm not used to talking to more than a couple of people. It's very different from the way we learn in my home country.
Yes, I appreciate that.
So I think I know I should have included everyone, but I think I kept turning to the person next to me.
Is that because you were avoiding eye contact?
I don't think so. I'm not shy. It's just habit, I think.
Well, that will improve as we do more seminars.
Uh-huh.
Another difficulty is knowing when to speak.
Like when it's your turn.
Yes.
Yeah. I felt I did wait for a pause.
Yes, you handled that quite well.
The thing I'm really concerned about is keeping up with the discussion.
Does your mind wander off?
Sometimes. I jot down a lot of information, but I still find myself thinking about something else when lots of other students are talking.
If there's an assignment to do at the end of a group, that usually helps.
I'm sure it does.
Okay. Now, the last thing I want to look at is the role that you play in the seminar.
What do you mean?
Well, when students work in groups, they don't all behave the same way. Some students are quiet, some look for support, some ask a lot of questions.
Oh, that's a new idea to me. I don't know what I'm like.
That's probably because you're thinking about your own performance all the time.
I guess so. I mean, should I be different in some way?
What I would say is that when we do the next seminar, you should look more at the people around you. You know, look outside yourself.
Like ask myself how they feel?
Yes, or what they're looking for from the group.
Okay.
It doesn't take much, but it's important to watch what other students are doing.
Okay, I'll do that.
Fine. Now, I'm going to suggest...
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Now, I'm going to suggest a couple of strategies for next week's seminar.
Okay, that's great. I need to participate more.
Well, it's not a question of saying more, but we need everyone to feel comfortable about giving their views.
Then the discussion is better.
Yes. So, you're a confident person.
Should I make sure I'm near someone who's quiet?
You can do, but it's more about how well you pay attention to other students.
Okay, so I need to be attentive.
Yes, and then encourage someone else to say more by saying, What did you mean when you said, or what do you think about the idea that...
That way I'm talking.
Yes, but you'll find that other people will talk too. You'll all start to get really involved.
Right. They're good suggestions.
The other thing that can really help is the way you take notes.
Yeah, I know I write down everything, but I should be stricter with myself.
Well, you actually need to think a few days ahead.
Really?
Yes. What's the topic, and what's the best way of making notes?
I see. So I have a strategy when I walk in the room.
Exactly. Then when you read through them later, they'll make sense, and you won't have to write them out again.
I always have to do that.
The other thing I would say is that you should include a small column in your notes where you can jot down things you want to go back to before the seminar ends.
Like a reminder.
Yes. Notes aren't just for later. You can use them as a prompt when there's a pause in the discussion.
That's been really helpful.
Okay. See you in class tomorrow.
Thanks.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. In this section, you will hear a lecture on the research on teen brain. Now you have half a minute to read the questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today our guest is Joseph Parks, Medical Director for the Botany Department of Mental Health. He's going to give a lecture about the research on teenage brain.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to introduce the new research about adolescent mind, the teenage brain. How much do you know about that? Do you believe in brain scanning? Do you think we can judge whether a teen is normal or mentally ill? Or it's just another immature test? The new research shows a teen brain is in the middle of disordered changes. Those changes, scientists now believe, are so significant that they may reveal the mysteries of mental illness, explaining why some teens commit suicide, why others harm their classmates, and why some emerge later in life with mental disorders. The research looks forward to a day when teens could be tested for suicidal depression as easily as they are for heart disease. But there are signs that society and parents in particular would reject such a tool. Many parents question the validity of a mental health diagnosis. They fear that their children will be falsely tagged with a mark that he or she is abnormal. At the center of the debate is the teen brain, its confusing architecture, and the difficult question of what's typical in a teen and what's not. Under the old thinking, the adolescent brain was fully formed, needing only to be filled with facts, figures, and experiences to become an adult mind. At the same time, many people rejected the idea that young people were even capable of developing mental illnesses. However, the new research shows a teenage brain is an organ in transition. It has an unstable and vulnerable composition. The evolving teenage brain clearly isn't adult-like until the early 20s. If teens act young and stupid, it may be because brain areas that govern rational thought are not mature yet. All that is fine when the brain develops normally. But if the teen brain fails to successfully reinvent itself as an adult brain, mental illness may happen. Researchers increasingly believe if that process stops for some reason, teens are likely to develop mental illness. Early warning signs might be disregarded, as adults may think them the typical teen behaviors. Perhaps the chief hope of the new research is that it could make a difference for teenagers suffering from mental disorder and major depression. These can lead to suicide, which for years has been the leading cause of death for teens. Until recently, scientists couldn't peer into living brains to look for changes associated with normal development or mental diseases. That is beginning to change as researchers develop ever more sensitive brain scanners.